Mitral regurgitation. Mitral regurgitation is defined as it's an abnormal reverse blood flow from left ventricle to the left atrium. That is the backflow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium. And how it's caused means it is caused due to the disruption in any part of the mitral valve, that is the mitral valve apparatus. You can see that is the normal flow of blood that is from the left atrium to the left ventricle. Here you can see the backflow of blood from the left ventricle to the left atrium, that is the regurgitation. Coming to the etiology, the most common etiology for mitral regurgitation include mitral valve prolapse and rheumatic heart disease and infective endocarditis, that is inflammation of any endocardium. Then annular calcification. Annular calcification is deposition of calcium in the mitral valve. Then cardiomyopathy. Cardiomyopathy is a group of diseases that affect the heart muscle. And ischemic heart disease, that is diminished blood supply to the heart. And less frequently, the mitral regurgitation can be caused by collagen vascular diseases. Collagen vascular diseases, that is mainly occur in the bodies of immune system, attacks its own tissue. And in any chest trauma or any previous chest radiation. And carcinoid disease. Carcinoid disease is a rare cancerous tumor called a carcinoid tumor, secretes certain chemicals into the bloodstream. And the hypereosinophilic syndrome. Hypereosinophilic syndrome is a peripheral blood eosinophilia with the manifestations of organ system involvement or any dysfunction, and even exposure to certain drugs. Pathology, that mitral valve regurgitation is classified as primary and secondary, and the primary mitral valve regurgitation is caused by an abnormality in mitral valve, and secondary mitral valve regurgitation is caused by an abnormality in left ventricle of the heart. Coming to the primary mitral regurgitation, the most common cause of primary mitral regurgitation is that is 50%. It is caused due to myxomatous degeneration. This myxomatous degeneration of the valve is a progressive non-inflammatory disarray of the structure involved, and it's mainly caused by the defect in any integrity of the structure. And this causes a stretching out of the valve leaflets and the chordae tendineae. The chordae tendineae is known as the heart strings, and these are tendon resembling fibrous cords of connective tissue. And the elongation of the valve leaflets and the chordae tendineae prevent the valve leaflets from fully coapting when the valve is closed. And this causes the valve leaflets to prolapse into the left atrium, thereby causing mitral regurgitation. Here you can see the left diagram, that is where exactly the mitral valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle. And second diagram you can see that is the malfunctioning of the mitral valve, that is the bulging. It allows backflow of blood into the left atrium from the left ventricle, that is causing a progressive enlargement of the left atrium. And rheumatic heart disease, here the chordae tendineae is thickened and foreshortened, producing restrictive leaflet motion. And here you can see the posterior dilatation of the mitral annulus also usually is present. And ischemic heart disease causes mitral regurgitation by the combination of ischemic dysfunction of the papillary muscles, and sometimes there may be a dilation of the left ventricle that is present in ischemic heart disease, and which is subsequent displacement of papillary muscle and dilation of the mitral valve annulus. Coming to the secondary mitral regurgitation. Here the secondary mitral regurgitation, there will be a dilatation of the left ventricle, and it will cause stretching of the mitral valve annulus and displacement of papillary muscle. And this dilatation of the left ventricle can be due to any cause, that is dilated cardiomyopathy including aortic insufficiency. And we also call this as functional mitral regurgitation because here the papillary muscles, chordae and valve leaflets are usually normal. Coming to the functional classification, this Carpenter's given the functional classification of the mitral valve disease. That is mainly here, it is helped to describe the mechanism of valvular dysfunction. And this classification is based on the opening and closing motions of the mitral leaflets. Type 1, here there will be a leaflet motion will be normal, and type 2 there will be excess leaflet motion, that is leaflet prolapse, and type 3 restricted leaflet motion, and type 3A there will be restricted opening, and type 3B restricted closure. And in type 1 mitral regurgitation, here mainly there will be a vascular insufficiency occurs secondary to annulus dilatation or leaflet perforation. And in type 2 mitral regurgitation, it's seen in patients with a mitral valve prolapse. And here what will happen, that is prolapse is caused mainly the thickened excessive leaflet. And most frequently in addition to ruptured or elongated chordae tendineae causing increased leaflet motion. And in type 3 insufficiency seen in patients with rheumatic and ischemic heart disease occurs from restricted leaflet motion either during systole and diastole or during systole alone. Here you can see the dysfunction and the lesions and etiology. And coming to the type 1, that is normal leaflet motion, here the lesion will be annular dilatation, leaflet perforation, and there may be a tear. And etiology is caused due to mainly dilated cardiomyopathy and endocarditis. And in type 2, that is excess leaflet motion, that is leaflet prolapse, the lesion is elongation of rupture chordae or elongation of rupture of papillary muscle. And the etiology is it's caused due to degenerative valve disease, that is maybe fibroelastic deficiency or Barlow disease or Marfan disease. And here even there may be endocarditis, trauma or ischemic cardiomyopathy. And coming to the type 3A, it is the dysfunction is restricted leaflet motion. And here the lesion is leaflet thickening and retraction, and there may be a calcification of leaflet or caudal thickening, retraction or fusion or commissural fusion. And the etiology is rheumatic heart disease or carcinoid heart disease. And in type 3B, that is the dysfunction is restricted leaflet motion and lesion, that is left ventricular dilatation or aneurysm or papillary muscle displacement or chordae tethering. And the etiology is caused due to ischemic or dilated cardiomyopathy. Coming to the pathophysiology here, that regurgitation of left ventricle systolic volume, that is it will be reducing the cardiac output, and what it will cause, it will be causing a left atrial dilatation. And this left atrial dilatation will be causing, there will be an atrial arrhythmias and the occurrence of thrombus and reactive pulmonary hypertension and leads to right heart failure. And the next what is happening, the left ventricular volume overload and left ventricular hypertrophy and overall left ventricular dilatation. So here at last the patient is going for left ventricular failure, that is the patient develops the symptoms of pulmonary edema and systemic hypotension. And here mainly when we are doing the echo, we can monitor the ejection fraction. In normal, the ejection fraction is 68%, and in acute mitral regurgitation, the ejection fraction will be 83%, and in chronic mitral regurgitation, the ejection fraction will be 77%, and in decompensated mitral regurgitation, that ejection fraction will be 57%. And the normal systole, here you can see from the left ventricle the blood is pumping to the pushing to the aorta, and what is causing an acute mitral regurgitation, here there will be a high atrial pressure because from the left ventricle the blood is pushing back to the left atria, so as a result the left atria is getting hypertrophy and leads to pulmonary edema. And in case of chronic mitral regurgitation, you can see overall there will be a dilation of left atria and left atrial enlargement. The clinical manifestation depends on the phase of the disease. Here the individuals with the acute mitral regurgitation will have the signs and symptoms of decompensated heart failure, that is the symptoms of shortness of breath, pulmonary edema, orthopnea, paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. And there may be symptoms suggestive of low cardiac output. There may be the patient will be having a decreased exercise tolerance, and even palpitations also common. And in chronic compensated mitral regurgitation, most of the patient will be asymptomatic with the normal exercise tolerance and no evidence of heart failure. And the patients may have normal exercise tolerance until systolic dysfunction of left ventricle develops, and the patient may be experiencing fatigue, dyspnea on exertion, or shortness of breath. And with the time, patient may feel chest palpitation if atrial fibrillation develops, result in chronic atrial dilatation. So in case that the patient is developing a chronic atrial dilatation, will be causing an arrhythmia, that is atrial fibrillation. And teen patients with the left ventricular enlargement or more severe disease eventually progress to symptomatic congestive heart failure with the pulmonary congestion and edema. And in diagnostic evaluation, physical examination on auscultation, commonly S1 is usually soft, and when we are placing the stethoscope on the apex, there will be an apex beat often with the heave, and you can see the high-pitched hollow systolic murmur at the apex, and it may be radiating to axilla, heard best when lying on the left side. And the loudness of the murmur does not correlate well with the severity of regurgitation. And we can also hear S3 sound commonly, that is the atrial fibrillation. Here you can see the chest X-ray, left ventricular enlargement and left atrial enlargement. You can see there is an enlargement of left atria and left ventricle, and even the pulmonary venous congestion. And in ECG, again there will be a left atrial enlargement. You can see the P mitral and atrial fibrillation, left ventricular hypertrophy. So you can see there will be a widened QRS complex. And when we are doing an echo, there will be a diagnostic and commonly used to confirm the diagnosis of mitral regurgitation. And even the colored Doppler, that is transthoracic echocardiogram, will reveal a jet of blood flowing from left ventricle into the left atrium. And it may detect a dilated left atrium and ventricle and a decreased left ventricular function. Coming to the treatment. So here mainly we will be reducing the afterload by giving the diuretics, both osmotic diuretics and loop diuretics. We will give that mannitol or injection Lasix. And beta blockers, metoprolol will be given to improve the left ventricle dysfunction. And intra-aortic balloon pump in acute mitral regurgitation, that is to improve the blood pressure. So we will be connecting the patient to the intra-aortic balloon pump. That IABP will be done in the coronary, the cardiac catheterization laboratory. So usually the femoral artery will be puncturing, and through the femoral artery and 9 French catheter will be inserted, a sheath will be inserted. Through the sheath, big balloon catheter will be introduced. The tip of the catheter will be having a balloon. So once it's there in the aorta, they will be inflating so that the enough blood will be pumped and the patient will be connected into the IABP machine. And here the augmentation and augmentation will be fixed, that is minimum 110 to maximum 100. And in the presence of atrial fibrillation, beta blockers, calcium channel blockers and digitalis also can be given. And consideration of anticoagulation for patients who develop atrial fibrillation or have mitral replacement surgery, mainly we will giving to prevent the clot formation. Anticoagulation will be prescribed. And even prophylactic antibiotics can be given before any dental procedure or any gingival tissue, or the patient has any prosthetic wall replacement or endocarditis. All these things will be treated by antibiotic therapy. And even the patients, based on the hemodynamic factors, we can start the inotropic agents in case of chronic severely symptoms of mitral regurgitation. And mitral valve operations for correction of mitral regurgitation, that is mitral valve replacement. repair of leaflet perforation or annuloplasty. So how do I get ready for an open mitral valve replacement? So here, as planned for the surgery, the doctor will decide what kind of valve will work best, and they will be replacing the valve. So two types of valves are available, that is biological valve or mechanical valve. And the biological valves made of pig, cow or human heart tissue, and biological valve don't last as long as mechanical valves. The mechanical valves are man-made. If patient receive a mechanical valve, they need to take blood thinning medications. And because the patient those who are having the mechanical valve very fast, they may be getting an infection. And we have to consult with the doctor and avoid eating or drinking anything after midnight before the surgery, and start smoking, ask the doctor to for ways to help. And here even certain medications should be stopped as per the doctor's instruction. And usually we will ask the patient to take blood thinning medications like warfarin or aspirin, and the previous day the patient will be arrived to the hospital, and they may need some routine test, that blood test before the surgery, that is chest X-ray, ECG, blood test, that the complete blood count, total count, differential count, that uremic factors and blood grouping, typing, all the things we will be taking, and even PT, PTT, INR, and even coronary angiogram in order to assess blood flow in the arteries. And about 1 hour before the operation, medicines will be given to relax. What happens during an open mitral valve replacement? Here the doctor will give anesthesia before the surgery starts, and it will be causing the patient to go deep sleep, and they will not feel pain during the operation. And this operation will take several hours, and here the family and friends will be staying in the waiting room so surgeon can update them. And so here what they will be doing means that incision will be made down the middle of the chest to assess the heart. Doctor will separate the breastbone, and the surgery team will attach a patient to heart-lung machine, and the machine will act as patient heart and lungs during the procedure. And the surgeon will remove the current mitral heart valve and replace it with a new valve. And at last the surgery team will remove the heart-lung machine, and the team wire the breastbone back together, and the team will then sew or staple the incision in the skin back together. So what happens after an open mitral valve replacement? Here the patient will begin the recovery in the intensive care unit or a recovery room, and the patient may be feeling confused at first, so even we have to reassure the patient. And most people who have mitral valve replacement notice immediate symptoms relief after the surgery. And here the team will carefully monitor the vital signs, that is temperature, heart rate, respiration, and in case that the patient is having any central venous line, CVP, all these things to be monitored and hourly output. And they may hook up to several machines so the nurse can check this more. In case that the patient is connected to the IABP machine, so we have to check the augmentation level and the sensitivity. We have to check it, and we should document in the nurse's record. And the patient may have a tube in the throat to help to breathe, and this may be uncomfortable and they won't be able to talk, and even it may be removed after 24 hours. And even the patient may have a chest tube to drain excess fluid from the chest, and bandages will cover the incision. They can usually come off with a couple of days, and patient may feel some soreness, but they should not feel severe pain, and we can supply some pain medication. And in a day or two, patients should be able to sit in a chair and walk with help, and we can make the patient to perform some breathing therapy to help remove fluids that collect in the lungs during surgery. And the patient will probably be able to drink the day after surgery, and they can have soft foods as soon as they can tolerate them. And even they may receive elastic stockings to help blood circulate through the leg veins, and probably need to stay in the hospital for around 5 days. And here you can see the replacement of mechanical valve and the replacement of biological valve. So the difference between the mechanical valve and the biological valve. And this is the damaged valve leaflet, the left diagram, and the right one is the annuloplasty ring. Coming to the mitral valve, annuloplasty is a surgical technique for the repair of leaking mitral valves. Due to various factors, the two leaflets normally involved in sealing the mitral valve, and the surgical repair typically involves the implantation of a device surrounding the mitral valve called the annuloplasty device. And this commonly pulls the leaflet together to facilitate coarctation and aids to re-establish mitral valve function. And here you can see various types of the valves which is used for annuloplasty. This is the various types of valves which is used for annuloplasty. Coming to the nursing management after mitral valve replacement, first activity, here a sensible balance of rest and activity is the key to a good recovery. Mild exercise will hasten the mobility when at home and make the patient to balance periods of activity with the periods of rest. And rest and sleep, plan or build rest periods into the day and balancing the activity with the periods of rest. Diet. Maintain a hard, healthy, low salt and low fat diet, and the calories from food are important to help heal the incision. And medications, mainly we will be advised the patient to take the medicines like warfarin or Coumadin, that is a blood thinning medication. And in case the patient is receiving this medication, that is warfarin or Coumadin for a long time, we should advise the patient to take PT-INR level. Weight, check the weight each morning and record it. And care of incision. Once the patient sent to home, the patient may shower daily and use soap to wash the incision, and do not use sponge or washcloth on the incision at this time, as those material may be too rough. Thank you.